Hello, today's day 2 of teaching myself how to animate, and today I used a really awesome online source called Animator's Island, I believe. I basically started by looking up animation exercises, and it led me to their page where I watched like an hour and a half of some guy teaching how animation works and the fundamentals and the basics, and using the ball bounce as an example. And so if you go watch my previous episode of day 1, my ball bouncing animation did not turn out that great because I used no references other than a couple images that I found online. Today I was actually watching a full-on tutorial and trying to understand how the ball bounce actually works and kind of the physics of it, and I think I understood the exercise a lot better. It's not to create the animation, it's to understand the following dynamics. So I started off this one learning about easing in and out versus linear motion. And in case you don't know what that is, it's basically the different ways that an object moves in animation. Linear is where it just gets from one place to another with no acceleration or deceleration at all within the animation. And that's it's good to know, but it's not usually what people use. Usually there's a thing called an ease in and ease out, which is used to portray something speeding up and slowing down really fast. And so that's kind of what I was grasping. I was just making this quick little practice animation, mostly as a warm-up, but also just following along with his tutorial. And today I finally figured out why my animation kept playing past the frames that I had and wasn't looping properly like you see on the screen. That is because on Clip Studio, it's a little different than the software that he was using, which is Krita. You have these two little playheads, and then you can move around the portion that you play, which that is honestly a pretty cool feature that I just had to figure that out myself, I guess. But you'll see me later messing around more with the software as I learn more about it, and unfortunately some of my files corrupted when I was practicing animations. Later on you might see that. But last time, the animation that I made was of my self-sona and actually had details and stuff, but it wasn't a very ambitious animation because of that, and I feel like that was restricting me. And so today, I was actually focusing less on just learning the software, now that I feel like I have kind of a hang of it. Now it was actually time to learn the real fundamentals of animation. And another disclaimer, this is not a tutorial. This is not me giving sound advice. I am no way a professional animator at all, so keep that in mind. Go watch some of the tutorials that I'll list. I always list all of my resources that I use down in the description, so if you want to do this with me and follow along so we can both go on this journey together of animation, then you can totally take a look at the resources down below, which are amazing resources, and hopefully by the end of this I'll have a good grasp on animation. So I'm just tinkering around with learning how to change the frame rate, which you actually go into animation and you can change it from that subfolder, and that's something that I also had to look up. But actually the software gets kind of easy, and especially if you already know Clip Studio, but it gets easier the more that you tinker around with it, which I guess is a given. But there's my cute little animation. Trust me, I make more interesting ones. Today isn't going to be a super fun day, no crazy animations or action or characters. I mean, I guess the last one's a character if you want to call it that, but I really don't have anything special planned other than just to learn the fundamentals of animation. So I'll try my best to kind of explain it to you and what I've learned. So, as far as just animation goes, the easiest thing to work with is obviously a circle or a ball. And you want to be sure that you know how physics works. And of course, some people are going to say, oh, well, I only want to do cartoon animation, so I don't have to learn all these real-world physics. Well, it's the same thing when people tell you to learn anatomy. If you want to do a super stylized and cartoonish kind of art style, then that's great, but you have to know real hard anatomy first in order to be able to know what to exaggerate and how much to exaggerate it. The same goes for animation. You have to know the basic fundamentals and the real life examples before you can start exaggerating it on your own. So that's just what I was learning. I was learning how a ball moves, and now that I animated going to the right, I was just making a quick animation of it going to the left. And this is just how to basically create something that can move in a fluid motion rather than just a static image. That kind of just looks like you copy and pasted it over and over. And I think it turned out alright. It's definitely not the best, but I do think that it ended up looking at least decent. But then again, I am not a professional animator by any means, and so I think that it was pretty good for, you know, my warm-up today. So this jump that you see, I'm so sorry, but the footage corrupted, and so I was not able to record myself animating this little snippet, but basically the gist is that these little lines that you see going up, they're there to mark the different pinpoints in time that a ball is moving. But the nice thing about animation is that a lot of the work is done by the viewer's brain, which basically fills in the gaps, so you don't have to animate every millisecond of an object moving, and obviously that's great. And so what you see me doing here is the same motion of easing in and out, where you can see kind of the green onion skin circles. And so that same exact motion is what is going to, I'm basically trying to follow and trace, and so I'm creating a secondary movement with another ball on the other side of this little track that I've given myself. And I'm going to exaggerate this second movement with a little splat on the ground. And I didn't have enough room to basically make it go all the way back up smoothly, so at the end it's kind of choppy, but you can see kind of how it starts to speed up as it gets closer to the ground. And of course it's kind of a quick movement, and so it's not super obvious, but if I slowed it down you could probably see, which you can probably just turn this video to 0.5 speed if you really wanted to. So this next bit is just me trying to edit the second animation that I did to be what is known as like a halftime, where it is more cartoonish and exaggerated and it goes a little faster. It's that kind of snappy animation that you see a lot of YouTube animators have, where it's the like 1-2 pose, where it goes from one pose to another. SAD-ist is a great example of this, and I'll throw up an example of one of her animations on the screen. Of course, credits to her. And that is basically another way of animating less realistically. And it just depends on your style too. It depends on what kind of animations you want to make. Do you want to make more realistic ones, or do you want to make cartoony ones? A lot of anime uses more static animations, if that makes sense, whereas there's less animations and it's more 2 frames kind of moving back and forth. And if you look at any anime GIF or animation, of course this differs from different animes. This is not all animes. I'm talking about the basic ones where you think of anime and that anyone can think of it, just the not mainstream ones, but you know what I mean, 1980s anime or whatever. A lot of them use that sort of flickering back and forth or repeating cycles just to make it easier, and that's why recreating animations is much easier than recreating these high budget animations, because typically you don't see that sort of many frames and heavy movement action going on with anime. Obviously, yes, there are examples that are not like this. There are amazing animes that have high budget animation, but of course, there's not going to be something that fits in every mold. So what I'm doing here is still the same thing of trying to make it more cartoony, because I'm really trying to get that sort of snappy feel, and I'm not one who's gonna animate super realistic things, because you've seen my art style. If you follow my channel, you know that I am not a realistic artist, that I typically draw more anime stuff. But I think it turned out pretty good. Definitely better than my last ball bounce, which I'll put up on the screen now. Yeah, definitely less of a failure. So the second thing that I wanted, or I guess the third thing I wanted to animate today, was a quick head turnaround. And this is the next step in the little animation basics thing I was following from the Animation Island, what am I thinking of? Tutorial, I guess I was following, which is just a very simple character looking up or just turning their head. And it sounds really easy, but when you put it into practice, it's actually pretty hard. This footage is a little sped up, so my process for this was definitely a good deal longer than it seems, because I really had to figure out what I wanted to do. But something that is really helpful is, rather than trying to animate frame by frame by frame, I usually just knock out the keyframes first, where I'll draw the first character, which in this case I just wanted a very blank, low expression, low detail character, and I just draw the first frame, the middle frame, and the last frame. So you'll see me drawing the first frame, and then here's the second frame. The hard part with not just copy and pasting and editing is that you have to get the proportions right, otherwise it looks like they're shrinking and getting larger, or very, very, very wiggly, which is something that I kind of had to try to not do. So I relied heavily on the transform tool. For people who animate on paper or make like flip books, those people, they're not human. They just, I don't understand how they can do that. They have some crazy magical powers, I swear. I live off of the transform and liquefy tool. Those are the best tools to ever exist, so I couldn't understand why anyone could have the ability to do that on paper, but those people frankly scare me a little bit. But anyways, back to the illustration. So here I am doing the last frame, and like I said, if you can look at the onion skins and look at the last frame, it's a super simple animation in theory. And I mean, it's kind of cute, right? I kind of got a little attached to this guy. He reminds me
I don't know what you mean by, hey Siri, I mean, it's kind of cute, right?
Oh my god, that was my Siri from my phone. That scared me so bad. Sorry about that. Oh right, okay, so there's this animator called Ocarade. I'll throw up just an image of his page right now. I really like looking at his animations. They're very smooth, but I don't know, this guy kind of reminded me of him in a way. But anyways, enough about that. Duplicating the layers is great for trying to create a smoother animation that makes more sense, because you don't have to redraw everything and worry about making it completely perfect to the original. But something that kind of sucks is that on Clip Studio, it kind of gets jumbled. So you see how it automatically labeled that layer 1A. It makes sense because I'll have it in the first segment, but if I want to duplicate a layer and then have it show up after frame 3, for example, on the timeline, it's still going to be labeled as 1A, so I have to relabel it. Of course, I don't label my layers, and I totally get that this is my problem, but it still is just, I guess, it can get confusing at times, especially because you have to individually assign each layer to the respective frame. And so that's going to get a little jumbled, because sure, you can put them in different animation folders, which will help organize them a little bit. But if it's all in the same folder, then it's going to, in the menu where it says that you can assign it to the frame, it's going to be a little jumbled, a little unorganized. And I know there's ways that I could do that, but I'm just saying, because I'm too lazy to do any of that. Unfortunately, it's going to cause problems for me and the organization. So hopefully I'll have to work in that habit to start labeling and start organizing my layers if I start doing more complicated animations than this. So once you have the keyframes in place, once I have the first animation frame and then I have the second frame, it's just a matter of moving around the different parts and kind of mixing and matching the different aspects of the original frame, just to sort of give it a more fluid motion, so it doesn't look like I hand drew every single frame, because that's not the vibe that I'm going for, even though it's the vibe that ended up being in the end, unfortunately. I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And you'll see also on the top of his head, I just kind of made it an oval just so I can keep track of it, I guess. Because when he looks up towards the camera, I want to show that his head is kind of tilting backwards and the top of the head goes out of sight. And so also when he looks down to the side, then it's also going to be invisible because his head is still tilted sort of towards us. If he had a jaw, you would be able to see like the slight underside of it. I don't know why I'm gesturing like you can see me, but so a lot of copy and pasting was involved with this, but unfortunately it's not as easy as in the regular painting mode, because you have to be careful not to just hit, copy paste. You have to hold on the frame and hit duplicate, and then you have to assign it to the frame. But I explained all this in my last video too, when I was basically just trying to learn the software and I wasn't trying to learn any of the fundamentals of animation. I think I learned a lot today, definitely. I watched a lot of videos and I did a lot of practice. I also did some off-screen practice, but I think that it definitely helped me get a better grasp on animation and some of the terminology that's used, such as timing and spacing, which is basically how fast something is moving and how the way that you space different elements of your animation apart can create the illusion of how quickly it's going. Basically, the spacing is another word for velocity, and creating the illusion of velocity. That's really all animation is just trying to create the illusion of something that really isn't there. So there's not much to really talk about this process. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to fix the shoulders, and I'm trying to make them seem more cohesive, because right now it sort of looks like he's turning and shrugging and then going back down, sort of a hill motion where it goes up and then down. That's not what I really wanted, so I'm just trying to match up his shoulders with the onion skins that I'm seeing around the different frames. So I also wanted to make sure that his eyes lined up with the proper frame that was in front of it, so his eyes didn't look like they were going absolutely everywhere. And I think if I could change some things about this animation, I do think that his head kind of gets a little smaller towards the end, so I would probably try to fix that and make it a little larger, or make the beginning a little smaller, because if you see on the pink onion skins, his jaw goes down a little lower than towards the end, and you can see his eyes just kind of wiggling around and moving more than they really should. So I tried messing around with that a little longer, but I think at the end I just sort of called it a day, because at that point I've already been animating for a couple hours and I've already been watching plenty of tutorials, and I still, had to edit this entire video and voiceover. So at that point I was just, I don't want to say I gave up, but I do think that I just had this sort of good enough mindset, which I do not recommend, and that's sort of something that content creators get in the habit of, where it's good enough for the video, it's good enough for them, it's good enough art. And it's hard to sometimes balance what you're creating for yourself and what you're creating for your audience. And I know I don't have that big of an audience. I have almost 350 subscribers. Last time I checked, it was like 339, and I super appreciate every single one of you. But no matter how big or small your audience is, it's still an audience, right? And so just juggling that sort of pressure, as in what will they like, what will get people to like my videos, what will get people to comment, what will get people to view and watch it, that sort of thing is kind of leads to the mindset of, oh, it's good enough. So I would probably spend a little more time on this, maybe even line it, but for now, I hope to see this in the future, in 6 months from now, and go, wow, I really sucked at animating then, didn't I? Because that'll show how much I've learned and grown, you know? And I hope that if you're following along and doing this sort of animation journey with me, that you'll have the same mindset, that you'll also look back at your old animations that you'll make at the start of this and go, wow, I've learned so much, that now you'll know things. I mean, easing in and out and timing and spacing and all of these sort of things will become like second nature to you. And I'm hoping that this can be sort of your inspiration. This can be your sort of wake-up call, saying, go and do this thing. If you want to do this, just go do it. If you want to learn how to animate, do it. If you want to learn how to draw hands, do it. If you want to learn how to draw, even. If you don't feel confident in your drawing skills, go learn. Go do it. I've been wanting to do this for years. I've been wanting to learn how to animate for so long. I used to have friends in like literal middle school, and they would say, oh, well, I was just, learning how to animate, and they'd show me like a little flip book they made, and I go, oh my gosh, that's so cool, I want to learn. And even in the midst of COVID, I had a friend who took that time in COVID to teach himself how to animate, and he showed me some of the stuff that he was working on, and it's actually like really good. He was able to animate hair and the different way that people move, and I just thought that it was really cool. But of course now it's been like 4 years since that friend, since COVID, and I think that there's something to be said about procrastination with that I procrastinated way too long. And wow, this got really deep, I guess. But just do it. Don't hold off because you think that you need to get better. I held off for so long because I had convinced myself that I needed to work on my animation skill, or I needed to work on my drawing skills, that I wasn't a good enough artist to start animating, which is ridiculous. I mean, look at this stupid animation that I'm doing. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, it sucks. This like all the animations that I've done today and yesterday, they're not very good. But I still love them. I still like them a lot because they're mine and I've worked on them and I put time and effort and love into them. And I think that's what counts the most, and effort. So don't be scared to jump into something, to jump into creating that webtoon, to writing that story, to doing your homework, because I promise you that if you get up and actually do it, that you'll thank your past self for just taking the dive. So that's gonna do it for today, but I hope that you enjoyed today of teaching myself how to animate. Alright, catch you guys later. See ya!